Exclamation, everybody, and welcome back to Cube Ramblings. For me, it is Saturday night, December 26th, 2015. I hope everyone's had an excellent holiday week. It's been a restful one for me, that's for sure, as well as meeting with family and all those things, and nearly T-boning a woman who decided that whatever she was doing on her phone was more important than, looking both ways before shooting across a 4-lane highway, so on and so forth. Damn kids and your phones, nearly getting yourselves killed. But anyway, that is beyond the scope of Cube Ramblings. What I want to talk about is some games. Before we begin, though, apologies if there are more echoes in this recording than normal. I've been doing some changes around here in my home office, and I've actually probably made it easier for the sound to bounce around because there's less things in front of me than there used to be. So I am in the process of actually getting some sound dampening stuff in the mail. So hopefully this won't last for very long, and hopefully I'll be able to figure out where actually the echoes are coming from, because I am not good with audio at all. So yeah. I was actually looking around to see if there was some kind of tool that's like, here's where your echoes are coming from. But no, apparently not. That's too much to ask. But anyway, I digress. Let us talk about some video games. Now, it hasn't been a whole lot, as you can imagine, since it's been a short week with the holidays and whatnot, as far as reviews or games going on. Plus, it's the end of the year, so they're kind of most of the game journalists or enthusiasts or whatever they call themselves this week are taking it easy and not really. There's not much to report on other than roundups of what's happened in 2015 and all that stuff. And not all of them are, a lot of them are taking we're going to release one per day, so I'm kind of waiting for them to get through their whole top 10 lists so I can analyze and point and laugh at them whenever necessary. But in the meantime, I do have a top 10 list I can go through. Before we get into that, there was only one additional update around Cube World this week, and it was Wale just tweeting out that he's continuing work on the blocks that compose quests, and that was it. So more to come from that, according to his tweet. Anywho, over to some top 10 lists, or award lists, if you will. We're still waiting on the tabulation of the player's choices as far as IndieDB is concerned. There was voting for about a week, and now just waiting for the article to come out that says who came in the top 10. But in the meantime, the editors of IndieDB also come out with their top picks in several categories. So I'm going to go through those right now so we can comment on whatever ones I actually know anything about as far as everything else is concerned. For the Interaction Award, it went to Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time. From what I understand from this game, I actually looked at this game because obviously it's a sci-fi game, and I looked to try to possibly buy it, but then I realized that it's really, really dependent on you having two people to play with. It's a local co-op thing, and you're both actually co-oping. You're necessary. One person is steering while the other one is firing the guns, and so on and so forth. And it's kind of a bummer for me because it looks like a really cute and awesome game, but I don't have anyone to play it with locally, so I just kind of can't ever partake in that particular one. But I've heard, and from what I've seen in videos and whatnot, it looks like it's a whole lot of fun. It will probably damage relationships because it does require some tight coordination. That if that coordination isn't quite tight, there could be some strife engaged from that. But yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Lovers in Dangerous Space-Time. Creativity Award went to Frenbo. I have no idea what this game is. I've heard a lot of things about it. It says it's some kind of adventure game. It's got like a horror or creepiness theme to it. And I guess because of that horror theme, I've never really paid too much attention to it because I'm not really into the horror stuff. But they got a Creativity Award. You know, if you're a horror fan, I imagine you've probably already played the game by now, or you've heard of it. If not, it's out there. You might want to take a look at it if you're into that kind of thing. Community Award went to Eden Star. I played a very early alpha, I guess it was a pre-alpha of Eden Star back in the day for a side quest video. I still have, keys and access to Eden Star, an updated version of it on Steam now. I was going to revisit it at some point, but it is it's a survival sandbox game, much like a lot of the other ones, except for in this case, it also has a tower defense aspect to it. So when you spawn in, you are, at nighttime, you're attacked by like robots and stuff and aliens, and you have to protect your Eden Star or your Eden, what do they call it? Eden Stone or Eden something. I don't remember the exact terminology for it. But that's basically your base. It's your source of power. It's your everything. And you build up defenses, build up walls. You fire your own guns at the things coming in. You can build turrets, so on and so forth. It's pretty involved. And then, during the day, the idea is that you would go off and explore the area, find caves to go into, maybe not caves, but find areas, resource caches that you can pick up and add to your, base, to your Eden base, and so on and so forth. And it's all grid based, so everything you place down, you place in a grid, so it makes it a little bit easier to build and whatnot. It looked quite promising. I just didn't. It was so early at the time that I played it. There wasn't much to it, but I've heard that it's and it looks like it's actually gotten quite a bit of meat on the bones. So I'll be revisiting that at some point. The Worldly Award is going to Lemma, a game that I also intend on doing a side quest video on at some point. Lemma is a first-person parkour game. I played the I might have done. I don't know if I actually recorded it or not, but I played the demo of it, and it was pretty good. I mean, it wasn't. It didn't really knock my socks off. It. The biggest problem I had with it was the controls were not, at that time, were not very tight. And I don't know if that changed much or not, because, as a guy who is a big fan of Mirror's Edge, for parkour to work for me, I really need the controls to feel fluid. I really need it to be tight. I need there to be not so much guessing or guesswork, like I might run up this wall or I might not. And so it's really one of those things where you need repeatability. You need to say, yes, I know that if I run at this angle 99.9% of the time, I'm going to do a wall run. Or if I do this, I know I'm going to do a jump. And the problem is, with a lot of these games, it's not 99%. It's more like 60%. You might run up that wall, or you might just faceplant into it. And that's where I get the frustrations for me tend to roll in. And I don't know if Lemma solved some of those problems or not, but it is something. It has been fully released for a while now, and it's something that I wanted to revisit at some point and see if see how it works out. But it is basically just it's almost like it's not a free roam, but it's more of a walking simulator parkour game where there's a story that's playing out, and it's kind of like you're walking through a museum kind of thing. it's linear in that regard, but it's also a parkour game, so there are multiple paths to get around usually. But it's still, the idea is that you're getting to certain points in the world, so more of the story is told, and then you move on. It wasn't too bad. I want to, like I said, take another look at it and see how it holds up. The Visuality Award went to the Town of Light, and I have no idea what this game is. It says here, the Town of Light is a first-person psychological experience with locations and characters inspired by real events. I've never heard of this. I assume it's it says a psychological experience, so it's probably a slightly horror game, first-person. But I don't know much else about it besides that. The Innovation Award was given to Guild of Dungeoneering. Very good game. I played it on stream. I played a side quest video of it. I enjoyed that. It was a nice little build. Here's all these cards. All the cards are weapons. As you pick up weapons in the world, they give you access to more cards. And you kind of sort of build the dungeon that you're going to run through, though maybe not as it's not as fluid as maybe it could have been. Though you do have a choice of paths, most of the time there's really only one choice that makes any sense based on the map. You also place down enemies along the way to try to level up your adventures enough to be able to face the end boss. And that can be a little bit finicky at times until you learn the mechanics behind it. But once you get that down, it's actually not too bad. It's not one of those types of games that I could see playing multiple times through. Like once you've gotten through a good bulk of it, I don't think there's much else to do there. I played several hours of it, and I got a good amount of enjoyment out of it. I didn't get very far along, but I enjoyed what I had there. But again, I haven't had any desire really to go back to it either. So it's half of this and half of that kind of a deal. The Musicality Award was given to Karma Flow, another one I've never heard of before. It's Karma Flow, the rock opera, is a video game puzzle. It's a puzzle platforming game where the game story is presented entirely in the form of a rock opera sung by some of the world's most talented rock voices. Interesting. Okay, puzzle platformer with some rock opera stuff in it. So. And I guess, given as though it had the Musicality Award, I would imagine the music is probably fantastic and probably 90% of the reason you would play that game. Although I believe it's broken up into multiple acts because the launch trailer I'm seeing here is just Act 1. So I don't know if if all the acts are like different things that you have to buy, or if there's even an Act 2 yet, or... I'm not quite sure what with that. The VR Award. VR Award went to Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, which is an interesting one. It's one of those games where I think most people would agree who have seen it, would agree that VR really doesn't help with that game. I think most people would rather not play it as VR and rather play it with the mouse and keyboard. And have the second person off telling them what to do. It's I guess, what would you call it? Would you call it like an asymmetric game? I wouldn't even call it that, I guess. Basically, it's a cooperative game, except only one person is actually playing the game. The other person is reading off a PDF file to help them disarm these bombs. So there's basically a bomb manual, and then the game itself. And then the game itself, all the person can see is the bomb and all the modules on it, and they have to describe to the other person who's not allowed to look at the screen what they're seeing, and then that person looks through the PDF manual, bomb defusing manual, and tries to help them defuse the bomb before it explodes. Most of the bombs are like 5 minutes long, and then it gets harder, like 3-minute bombs later on. There's a lot of levels to it. It's one of those things that it's really good when you're streaming a game like that, because everybody can sort of participate and watch as things go on. It's also really good if you've got cheapo friends who can't buy games for whatever reason. Only one person needs to buy the game, and then everyone else can participate in it through the manual or through watching. It's a good game for watching too, I guess, is kind of the interesting thing there. Is it's very hard sometimes to find games where people will actually sit on a couch and just watch you play. This is one of those things where it's exciting enough that I think most people would watch it and try to participate through their eyeballs rather than through also through the manual diffusing. And also, since it's just a manual, you could have multiple people sitting there with the manual open and each taking a segment of the manual and then helping you out as you need it to be more efficient. So it's a really cool game. It's a cool concept. It's an interesting way of doing things. It's interesting. It's one of those. It seems like it's a perfect party type of game that would get everybody participating. Even people who aren't normally gamers would probably participate in that. So it's a nice gateway drug, so to speak. Iceberg Interactive's coolest game of the year has gone to The Universe Sim, which is not released yet. I backed them on Kickstarter, so I have a copy of the pre-alpha that I've been playing with here and there. It's got a long way to go yet. It's not ready for me to record or make videos of it yet, but it's a God game, sort of, at a planetary scale. It's a little bit like Spore, but not a lot. Whereas Spore had you making alien life and then going out and exploring the universe. This one, it kind of just gives you life, and you choose where it's going to start on the planet, and then from there you kind of direct them. It's a little bit like Populous, in that you kind of just direct your people. You don't do terraforming necessarily in this one. It's more like you can kind of suggest to them that they go terraform some areas and suggest them to do some things and kind of get it going that way. You're sort of hands off. Like I said, it's kind of like a God simulator thing where you're just kind of poking your fingers in wherever you can and just trying to guide them certain ways. And then the idea is that once you've taking control of your whole starting planet, then they can go into sort of a space age where they can launch off the planet and go find additional planets to go mine for resource or settle down on and terraform and so on and so forth. So that's why I say it's kind of like Spore in that regard, but also it doesn't have the genetic things that Spore had, where you're like creating these crazy alien things that then spawn off into the world, that sort of thing. But it's so early right now; it's hard to assess it at the moment. Best upcoming has gone to Squad, which is a first-person multiplayer shooter that aims for realism. It's a lot like your what is that Project Infinity, or I forget the name of it. There was some kind of there's a lot of military shooters that try to aim for the realism and stuff, and Squad is taking up that mantle. Verdun is another one that's multiplayer shooter that's set in World War II, and I believe it's World War II. World War I, World War II. I don't remember which one now. there were trenches, so maybe it could have been either. But it's it's another one in that same vein where it's just aiming for realism, aiming for the military shooter thing, making it multiplayer, and rolling with it that way. Besiege is the one that won Best Early Access. I got a copy of Besiege via the humble monthly bundle. I think it came in a December bundle. So I intend on playing that at some point. It's still early access, as far as I can tell. It's still early on in the development. I'm not sure how the building interface is. The problem I have with a lot of these building games is that when it's early on, sometimes their interface for building is not very intuitive to me personally. So I tend to shy away from them until they mature a little bit more, in hopes that the interfaces get a little bit better. I don't know if Besiege falls victim to that or not. I know that it kind of gives me that vibes from, because it's similar to other games that have like building interfaces that are kind of a little bit wonky at the moment. But I do want to jump into it and give it a full assessment on it. But basically, the idea of Besiege is you are building war machines and you're trying to destroy certain objectives on the world. And the world, it's kind of stylized world where they just give you sort of a little area that is, medieval town or something. And then it's just surrounded in just a white sheen, if you will. And then you just kind of fight there. And it's kind of like playing like toy soldiers and stuff on a battlefield on a table or something. And then kind of firing at it from, you're sending in all your orbital bombardments of of a toothpick and straw house kind of thing. But it's an interesting little game, and I do want to possibly look at it at some point. Best multiplayer went to Verdun. I was just talking about that. I've heard good things about that. I'm not big into it's First World War. Yes, World War One, because it had trenches. So I was wrong with the World War II one. World War One, it's set in. It's kind of like a trench capture game, like sort of like a capture the flag type of thing, where as you move up, as your team moves up, you can capture things. I own it. I have not played it at all. I'm kind of afraid of it, honestly, because I'm not very good at FPSs in the first place. I'm also not that into the military shooter things, like the realistic shooters, because I'm so bad at FPSs that I'll just get shot right away. But that said, if that's your cup of tea, apparently it's pretty darn good as far as multiplayer is concerned, and I think that there's been a lot of people to play with even now. So you could take a look around. I would spy it on Steam Spy first and see if there's a lot of people that seem to be concurrent users on it, concurrent players on it before you launch into it. That's kind of the rough thing about the multiplayer stuff, is that a game could be fantastic, but if it has a multiplayer game could be fantastic to play, but if it doesn't have anyone to play with, or if it dies down, the multiplayer scene dies down on it, it's kind of a bummer at that point, right? Because you can't really do much with it. And there's so many multiplayer games vying for people's attention that it kind of feels like there's a built-in expiration date on a lot of these multiplayer games, unless you find one that keeps people interested for a very long time. A lot of these multiplayer games, they kind of remind me a little bit of your what is it? Not Call of Duty, but the game is slipping my mind now, but it's the most popular multiplayer shooter game, CSGO. That's what it is. Counter-Strike Go. You get something like that that's a good investment because that's not going to die off anytime soon. When you look at something like Verdun or these other, military multiplayer shooters, you kind of worried a little bit that, they'll get some players in there, but how long will the players stay with it before they go back to Counter-Strike Go is really my question, or one of the others of those ilk. So always keep an eye on when you're looking at a multiplayer game, always see what the multiplayer scene looks like and whether or not it'll last. It sounds like this one will last, but you never can tell, right? For best single player, they gave it to Spooky's House of Jump Scares. I don't know anything about this game. I've heard of it, but I have no idea, no clue, nothing to jump in on with that. It just says 1,000 rooms. Can you survive 1,000 rooms of cute terror? So I don't know. Obviously, it's some kind of horror game that probably relies on jump scares, but who knows? And then they have their best overall category where they have first, second, and third place. In third place came Hacknet, a game I played, and I enjoyed it. It's a hacking simulator that tries to take real life commands. It dumbs them down a little bit, but it takes the real life commands and allows you to hack around. And as you're going through these systems, you're finding you get some quests along the way. But as you go through these systems, you're finding more bits of story, and then you can go and continue on from that. And let's see, second place is Soma. Probably don't have to say much about Soma other than it's a horror game, kind of, not very horror filled, honestly. It's first person. It's out on, I think, multiple different platforms, if I'm not mistaken, and it's follows the tale of a man who wakes up, who goes to the doctor, gets his brain scanned, wakes up far flung into the future, in a world that is underwater, and in a world that is has been burned by a comet, and he's got to do stuff. And I'm not gonna go any further than that because that's pretty much as far as it goes when you're looking at the previews of it. So I don't want to spoil anything. I've seen videos of the entire game, so I kind of know how it ends and I know what goes on. It is very linear. There's not multiple branches or anything like that. And like I said, it doesn't really. At first, it comes off as very much of a horror game, but then later on, it's not quite so bad. So there you go. It kind of forgets that it was supposed to be a horror game later on. And in first place came Prison Architects. This one is from I forget what is the I believe this is by the same company. I forget the company's name. It's a one-word name. That did hackers. See, I still Hacknet on here, and then there was another game that I played a long time ago. Introversion Games. Is Prison Architect by Introversion? I don't remember. I guess I could click on it and tell you. But I know Introversion had a hacker game in the past, and I own it, and I don't remember the name of it, to be perfectly fair. But it's that didn't take me where I wanted to go at all. What are you doing to me here? Yes, this is by Introversion Software. Yep. So these are the guys that did some other hacking game earlier on. They've done a bunch of other games as well that were actually pretty good. They're all sleeper hits, sleeper indie hits. Prison Architect has gotten a lot of attention because it is actually pretty good. You are building a prison, as the name implies, trying to keep all the facilities in there and being able to handle, offenders, the worst offenders, upgrading along the way. And the game throws a bunch of scenarios at you as you're playing that you need to meet in order to get money to continue funding more projects in it, and it's very much in the style of a tycoon management game, but with a little bit more control over the architecture and layout of your buildings. So that covers the IndieDB Editor's Choice stuff. Now, like I said, I'm waiting to see what the results of all the voting was. I'm sure that'll probably come out next week, I imagine. And then we'll be able to see what indie games, as voted by the players, made it to the top 10. So there you go with that. In addition to that, some more news around here. I have a lot of updates as far as trailers go. So let's just get through some of these trailers, and then I have another topic, or two other topics that probably going to take a long time to talk about, or at least a significant portion of time anyway. So going through the trailer roundup here. Everspace. We got a new Everspace trailer. Everspace is a action space shooter that it's one that I've backed on Kickstarter. It looks really cool. The visuals are pretty awesome. It's got some roguelite elements in it where you're trying to manage your resources. You're jumping between points. There is permadeath, I believe, in it. So on and so forth. Looks really cool. It's continuing to look really cool. The new gameplay trailer is calling itself the first playable, which means it's basically a tech demo. Look at whatever tech demo they have internally. Shows off a little bit of combat, a little bit of the visuals, but not much else. So you'll get to, at the very least, it's a little extra taste of what Everspace might be delivering to us soonish. I don't know if they said when. But they were quite well funded from Kickstarter. They blew by their goal. So waiting to see more good stuff about that. And what was the other one? Firewatch is a game by Campo Santo. That is a walking simulator where you are I guess you're a civilian. I don't know how they phrase it. It's like you're a civilian contractor, kind of, or volunteer, or something like that, where you actually man a Firewatch post. I think it's like set in 1989 or something like that. And the story unfolds as you're working this post. You talk to your supervisor who's in another post, 5 miles down the road, and various events happen. Some kind of spooky things go on, but it's mostly just here's a tale. You get to explore and learn what's going on. There's various little quests along the way. The 17 minutes of footage they show is actually from the second day of the game, where you actually go out and you have to figure out why communications lines have been cut, and then go look for some campers who have been giving you some problems. They gave you some problems in day one, and then are continuing to wreak some havoc along the way. And it's a lot of that. It's a lot of exploring, a lot of walking, a lot of just interactions with your buddy in the other tower via your radio, and getting to know them or not. You can choose to not talk to them at all. You can choose to talk to them about certain topics. You can unlock certain topics as you're going. It's very much in the spirit of a walking simulator, where it's just you are in control of how much story you get, kind of thing. So there's new video up showing 17 more minutes with the devs, and I'll leave you a link to that. And there was another trailer here somewhere. Quantum Break. This one's actually back from earlier in the month. I'm just getting around to it now. But I'll link you to Destructoid. They had a new trailer for Quantum Break out there, which is coming April 5th of 2016, as far as I know, unless it gets pushed back like everything else seems to be getting pushed back. But it's an interesting sci-fi game. It's third person. You are basically, you are walking through a world that is suffering from time dilation problems. Basically, there's an experiment that was going on, and it's unhinged the fabric of reality, or time anyway, and because of that, the world is going to end unless you can figure out how to reverse the damage that's been done to the space-time continuum. Since you are a part of the experiment that went awry, you have the ability to walk through these time dilations or time bubbles where time is frozen, and you can still walk through and manipulate things and try to get around puzzles that way. There's also a corporation that is after you, and you're trying to avoid them. They're shooty bang bang and all that stuff. It looks really interesting. I really want a piece of it. It is an Xbox One exclusive title though, so I like it because I can play it. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who are like, okay, why why no PS4 or PC or anything? Maybe possibly they'll do that, but right now it looks like it's just going to be Xbox One, so us Xbox Oneers can enjoy a game for a change, and instead of sighing when yet another PS4 exclusive is is announced. Damn you, Uncharted. So I'll link you to Destructoid. It's back from earlier in the month, so it's actually the trailer that was shown at the Game Awards, but I'm just now getting around to it, since I'm doing a little trailer roundup there. And I believe, oh, yep, there's one more here. We have a new video about the upcoming MOBA called Paragon from Epic Games. And it's showing off some of the gameplay footage. It's Paragon is a third person, third person, over the shoulder MOBA basically. It's got all the same trimmings that a MOBA has. It's got the, what do they call them? The mooks or whatever, the grunts, whatever they are, that you have to kill off. You have to get last hits on those. They've got, other heroes that are powerful that level up as you kill the other team, and they've got towers to take down, and so on and so forth. It's Smite, basically, only by Epic. So yeah, if you're looking for more of Smite that isn't Smite for whatever reason, that is probably the best way I can describe Paragon. It does have the card mechanics to it, where your powers and stuff are based on cards that you've collected, and then you can swap those cards in and out during gameplay to give your character different abilities. It is what it is. I'm not really. I don't know. I'm not big on the MOBAs, and MOBAs are really seem to be the thing that's happening the most anymore as far as multiplayer games go. And I don't know. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm kind of tired of them. But I also don't get that much enjoyment out of them, so I guess I would be tired of them at this point. It's basically that, instead of being an overhead one like a Dota or a League of Legends, it's like Smite. It's third person over the shoulder, 3D epic shooter, epic game shooter, basically. MOBA thing. So Yeah, there's more information in the Eurogamer article, a little bit more, that's about Paragon and what's going on with it. I would just recommend you look at the tutorial, the alpha, not tutorial, the video that they have embedded there, so you can see what the online test number 1 looks like, and you'll pretty much see that how much of a MOBA it pretty much is. It's as cookie cutter a MOBA as I think it could possibly be at this point, honestly. So, Steam has had a little bit of an issue over Christmas. Yesterday I came home after all the Christmas festivities to find the internet was aflame. It was aflame about Steam and caching. Apparently, earlier in the day on Christmas, when you logged into your Steam account, you saw somebody else's account, a cached version of usually some Russian or Eastern European account. And Steam, that happened for about an hour, and then Steam went down, and they fixed the problem and brought it back up. As part of that, they did say that it was a caching problem on their end. You were seeing cached versions of pages. You were not able to access the other person's account, from what we know, because it is just a cached version. But you were able to see their account page. So you're able to see the last 4 digits of their credit card, which you can't do much about. You can't do much with that, other than possibly do some phishing stuff on some social engineering, with customer service, and say, here's my last 4 digits of my number, of my credit card number. So beyond that, there's not much else that you can do with that information. But they did give out billing information, full billing information. You're able to see not only the person's name, but where where they're billing to, which is usually places where they're located. So that wasn't very good stuff. And then you could see their Steam username. You could see how much they had in their wallet, but you couldn't do anything with that information, and so on and so forth. So some thoughts on that. As a programmer who works on websites, there is one thing that I have known for a very long time, and it was beaten into my head very early on, and I'm very grateful that it was, and that is never, ever, 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 ever cache personally identifiable information. Okay? Caching is good. Caching is necessary for a site of Steam's caliber, right? It is necessary for that site to be, in order for it to be responsive to everybody, a cache is necessary. Building a web page dynamically, as pretty much all websites are, is a time-intensive, time-consuming process. When there's only 1 or 2 people on your site, not a big deal. When there's millions upon millions of people hitting your site, big deal, right? So that's where caching comes into play, where you build, the first person that comes in onto the store page ends up getting hit with the longer term, they got to wait 5 seconds or whatever for the page to build itself. And then the next 3,000 people that come through there don't. They just get served up a static page, a static web page. Static web pages are much easier to deal with because the browser gets all of its data in one shot, and the browser can go off and retrieve all the images and stuff and be very efficient about laying it out, and it'll start to display the text on the page before the images are fully loaded, so on and so forth. Static pages are where it's at. That's where you want it to be. A cache makes your dynamic pages act like static pages, where you're getting the absolute fastest speed that you can probably get from that. And caches are distributed, namely you can distribute the cache amongst multiple nodes, amongst multiple computers, and get the added benefit of having even more traffic flow through your site quicker. A lot of services have SLAs around how much time, what the acceptable amount of time is for a page to load. Now, for Valve today, those SLAs probably aren't that bad because they're so popular that, attracting new publishers and new developers and stuff to their service is not so difficult because they are the biggest one around. But back in their heyday, when they were just starting, just trying to sign on people and whatnot, I can imagine that there were probably some SLAs that were dictated to them by publishers looking to put stuff on their store. So it would not be surprising to me if, say an Epic Games or a Bethesda or a who's another big one? Think brain, think. I don't know. An Activision or something of that caliber would say to, it would not be out of the realm of possibility that they would say to Steam back in the early days, like, hey, or to Valve back in the early days, hey, if you want to list our stuff on your store, you must meet these certain criteria. Your page must load within, a second for even the worst connected people, or it must do this or must do that. It must have this many mentions of the price, or it must have this feature or that feature. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that they're still under some of those SLAs from way back in the day where, pages need to load in a certain amount of time. And that is incredibly difficult to meet as a site grows, because obviously you're getting more traffic, but also you're adding new features all the time, and every new feature you add adds more time to the dynamic page creation, which eventually adds more time to somebody, and then eventually that gets cached and everything's cool. So that's why websites cache, basically. And a cache is usually, as I said, distributed, but it's also usually segmented into regions. What that allows for is, hey, people over in Europe don't have to go through the international pipe to US to hit the server, right? They just get a cached version of the page out in Europe, and it's physics don't come into play at that point. You don't have such a long distance to go to get that page, and that makes the site much more pleasurable or much more responsive to them. Because that is usually geographically separated, typically you'll reuse session IDs. So there's usually like two different kinds of IDs. There's the unique ID that is everybody's gamer tag or whatever, and then there's the the number that is behind that, and then there's the session ID, which is fluid, right? It doesn't have to be unique. It's usually unique between regions, right? But not, well, it's usually unique within a region, but not between regions, right? So it'll be reused, say, over in Europe versus over in the US, because most of the time it's not that big a deal. And I say most of the time. Most of the time, if I get a cached page, if I open up Steam and I get a cached page that came from Europe, not a big deal. Except if it's in a different language, in which case, it would make it kind of hard to navigate. The problem here is really, from what I can tell, twofold. One is that it's never a good idea to cache anything that has personally identifiable information in it. So if you go to an account page or something like that, that page has to be rebuilt from scratch every time. I don't care what SLAs are around it. The SLAs don't apply because There's another thing that companies who do their own payment processing, and I think Valve does its own payment processing. I don't think they go out to a different payment processor. But there's certain things that if you do your own payment processing, the credit card companies demand certain things, right? Namely PCI compliance. And they set out a certain set of rules that say, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that, thou shalt not do this. Basically to try to keep keep information like this from leaking out. They demand that you do certain security measures in place in order to have them be accepted as a payment type. And there's different levels of that compliance, and the highest level of that compliance gives you the most freedom to do transactions. Lower levels of it, they can start to like restrict how many transactions you can do per month and so on and so forth. Also, with that comes the responsibility that if there's ever a leak, like what just happened, they can levy some heavy fines on you. Thing is, we as consumers will never know that. We'll never know if Valve gets fined for this, because that's usually something that happens behind closed doors, and it's between Valve and the payment processors like Visa. Visa is particularly stringent when it comes to that. MasterCard, not so much, but Visa is very, very stringent when it comes to PCI compliance. Like, if you're out of compliance even by 5 minutes, like one person out in Albuquerque saw something that they shouldn't have seen, for 30 seconds, like the fines are pretty darn hefty. Anywho, and rightfully so. I mean, that's stuff that shouldn't happen in this day and age. So with that said, there's probably going to be some problems there. That's why they're being really mum about it, right? It's like, oh, Valve hasn't said much about this. Like, what's going on? They just said they fixed it. They didn't say what happened and all this stuff and whether anything was accessed. It's because basically anything they say right now is going to make the pain even worse when Visa and everything comes down on them on it. So that's why you're not going to hear much probably. I laugh, but that's the way things roll. The second thing is, because of that PCI compliance, one of the things they say is you don't ever cache any personally identifiable information. So even if you have an SLA in place that's like, every page on this site must load in under 1 second, you need to disclude anything that has PCI or personally or PI or whatever they call it, personally identifiable PII, personally identifiable information has to be excluded from that. It has to be, because you can't cache that stuff, because there's always the possibility, like what happened this time around, that someone will see a cached copy that they shouldn't see. There's always that possibility. So you never cache that stuff. You always have to go back to the database for that. You always have to go through an authentication layer for that stuff. It just has to be. That's just the way it has to be. If you're not doing that, you're doing it wrong. And Valve did it wrong. Because that stuff, your account page should never be in a cache. It should never, ever be in a cache. The only cache that should ever hit is your browser cache, and even that is a no-no. Like that, you should be marked as no cache in the header, in the HTTP header. It should not even hit your browser cache. Never. That said, everything else on the site, like the store pages, the prices of things, the shopping cart can be cached because there's nothing in there that's going to throw anything off. Like, hey, I saw somebody else's shopping cart. Like, oh, big deal, Somebody else bought 10 packs of condoms. Whoop-de-doo, right? All those things can be cached up to the hilt. I mean, you can do as much as you want with that. It's just anything that's got personally identifiable information in it, nope, off limits. So that was bad. they did it bad there. They broke one of the cardinal rules of things. You just don't do that kind of thing. And that's the kind of thing you find out the hard way. I mean, it happens. Somebody says, this is a must. Some business person who doesn't know what they're talking about says, this must happen. And someone else says, yeah, whatever. And they do it. and they don't raise the flag like they're supposed to. So, and then someone else now who had nothing at all to do with that decision is probably going to lose their job because they forgot to flush a cache, or they forgot to add some region. Maybe there was a new region that spun up and it wasn't added to the flush all script, and well, that's what came up. I suspect, and I don't know anything about, I'm speaking completely as a normal average person here. I know nothing about how Valve is set up. I know nothing about it. I'm not speaking from any position of anything. But my guess is that what probably happened was they did some kind of build. They sent it out to production. As part of that, they were supposed to flush all the caches. Probably there was a new cache spun up for the European region because they might have been getting extra hits from Christmas and whatnot. So they probably spun something up and somebody forgot to put it into the flush all script. So when an IT person, some random IT person went and ran through the script as they were told to, it didn't do everything, didn't flush everything. Everyone's client probably doesn't go to a region. It probably goes to steampowered.com, which then some F5 or in there, that does the load balancing, L5, F5, whatever it is, probably looked at it and went, oh, you have this session ID. I've only got one session ID registered right now because it's in a cache that wasn't flushed properly. So here's your page. So I'm going to send you off to the European server to give you a cached copy here, as opposed to going and generating a new one. So probably a lot of people who saw issues probably had session IDs that were still cached in the Steam client, which happens. I mean, they're supposed to be cached. That's part of the deal, right? Your session ID tells the server on the other side what real server or what real cache to send you to every time, so that you're not bouncing between servers constantly. If you're in the middle of processing something like, hey, I'm going to buy something, I can't send you over to a different server unless it's distributed, right? I can't send you to a different server and say, okay, now go purchase it over here because that server doesn't have your cart yet. I got to send you to the server that you were at that has your cart information, you know what I mean? So I can't, session ID kind of sends you where you want to go. And I'm speaking in the I tense. I'm speaking in the present tense, but that's just how I say things. I, again, know nothing about what's going on there. It's, that's what happened. I think that probably it was just a perfect storm of those few things that took place. And unfortunately, it was just a dumb situation to find themselves in. Someone's going to get probably fired for it who had nothing at all to do with it. And, they got a lot of much deserved hate about taking an hour to fix the problem, to resolve what was going on. I don't fault anyone for, getting upset about that hour. I do cringe a little bit because having worked in the past, I don't work for one now, but in the past I worked for a company that did websites for stores. And I know that the holiday season is a mess when it comes to you basically, as a developer, as an employee of a company that works in e-commerce, you are not allowed to have any holidays ever. You're always on call for a holiday. And I remember times where it was like, you're celebrating some holiday with your family, and you get the call, and you gotta leave immediately, and you drive home, and you get on the computer, and then VPN in, and then try to do your thing, and then you're done, and you have to go back to your family and all that stuff. It's a pain in the neck. So the fact that it took an hour is, in my opinion, as someone who's been on that side of it, I I can understand why it took so long. I don't begrudge anyone who gave them hate for it, because yes, it is very important that that thing be resolved as quickly as possible so that people aren't seeing stuff that they're not supposed to see. Especially given the prevalence of people taking screenshots and just throwing them up on the web like idiots. You don't do that crap, but people will do it because they can. And yeah. But at the same time, being on the other side of that fence, I understand the pain of and why it probably took an hour. But anyway, that's my theories. That's what happened with Steam. It's all been resolved. As far as we know, there's been no compromise of accounts or anything like that. It was just a leak of information that shouldn't have been out there, of personal information that should have been private and was leaked. Hopefully none of those people who had their stuff leaked out will suffer any consequences, any negative consequences of it. But the internet being what it is, I'm sure someone's already taking advantage of it. And that kind of sucks. But yeah, Valve screwed up pretty bad. They screwed up pretty bad. And they are, even if we never hear about it, I can imagine that they are going to be paying fines for that screw up, as well as PR nightmares. I would not want to be the PR person for Valve at this point in time. Take an extra long extended vacation, I would imagine. So that's my theories around the Steam thing, and that's the information around it. Again, I just want to point out, though I have industry experience, I do not have experience with Steam or Valve or anything what they're doing. So do not take anything that I've said as acknowledgement of actual problems or what's going on. These are all half-baked theories based upon my own experiences in e-commerce from years and years ago. So do not run around saying that I said this and that, because I said nothing. I have said nothing, and I will continue to say nothing as far as that is concerned. What else do we have on here? So, there was an article, a supporter article on Rock, Paper, Shotgun, where a 36-year-old man gave 5 reasons why he plays games. And they were pretty interesting reasons. I'm not going to recap them. I'd rather you just go read the article. They're right there. They're bullet pointed. But it got me thinking, like, why do I continue, as a now 35-year-old man, continue to play video games? What got me started? Why is it still compelling? And I don't have anything prepared, so I'm going to be, as always, coming up with this off the top of my head, trying to espouse the things that are in my brain without repeating myself, although I probably will repeat myself all over and over again. But I initially got into games with the NES era, and I was, 6 at the time, so it was to be fair, my brothers had an Atari, so I actually got in a little bit earlier than that with the Atari, and I liked playing games. I was a kid. It was something to pass the time. It was fun. It was interesting. But I always had an interest in electronic things, like what makes things work. I used to take apart VCRs that were no longer working, just to see how they worked and what all the components were. And I didn't know how anything really, I didn't know what I was looking at half the time, but I was fascinated by it. And games for me at that time were just an escape, right? It was just here's something fun to do because I have nothing else that I really want to play with. And I used to play board games a little bit here and there, but my problem as a kid growing up is I didn't really have anybody to play with. I mean, I used to play, some board games with family, but they were often not very interested in it. And, and by board games, I'm talking like Sorry and the occasional Monopoly game and things like that. Family-oriented games that just not the type of board games that you think of initially when you're talking about board games. And because of that, video games sort of filled a big hole there where I wanted to be able to play stuff, but I needed to be independent because nobody else wanted to play. So single-player video games were right there for me. Legends of Zelda, Dragon Warrior 1, and Super Mario Brothers, and Super Mario Brothers 2, and Super Mario Brothers 3, and Pilot Wings on SNES, and so on and so forth. All those games helped to just occupy me without needing the company of others who were busy doing other things. So that really... And that continued on as I grew into being sort of introverted. That really continued on into adulthood where I was like, you know what? I don't have anyone to play with, but here's something that I can do. Like I can't play board games because I don't have anyone to play with, but I can play these games because they're single player and I can stay occupied and so on and so forth. It's, there was a long period of time in there where I wasn't playing any games. College... I was too busy. When I started my career, I was too busy. It wasn't until, and also PC gaming had sort of died down quite a bit, where I wasn't, I needed a console to do things, and so I bought an Xbox 360, and I had a bunch of games on that. But then PC gaming picked up again, and I was able to get back into that, and that was just a few years ago that I finally got back into more of a routine when it comes to the games. But I was off of it for a while. I was too busy with other things, trying to get other things started, other things, working hours that I don't intend to ever work again, long hours with no sleep that I continue to pay for today. But the games were an escape. They were a way for me to just forget all the challenges of the day-to-day routine and the day-to-day life and just have something else to do and have something else to occupy myself. And in the case of, now, it's also become sort of and this is kind of funny to say, but it's become a weight loss thing because I've also struggled with my weight over the years. I'm a lot thinner than I used to be. Let's put it that way. But when I was off of video games for a while, I had TV and movies. And what I discovered was I started putting on a lot of weight, even more weight than I already had. Because as I was sitting there, I needed something to do while I was passively watching something. I just needed to I needed to do something. So I was always multitasking. I was trying to maybe I was reading a book at the same time I was watching something, or most cases I was watching something and then a commercial would come on. I go, all right, well, I'm going to go get a refill of my soda, or I'm going to go get some food, or I'm going to get, chips or something unhealthy inside of my body because I got nothing else to do. Games lately have been a way for me to stay away from the refrigerator because I'm always got something to do. I'm immersed. I'm doing something with my fingers. I'm not moving from this chair, which is kind of sucks because I'm not getting the exercise I need. But at the same time, at least I'm not, fistfulling Hot Pockets and God knows what else that is unhealthy for me. So it's actually helped from that perspective where I'm immersed enough, I'm occupied enough that I'm not thinking so much about food and things of that type. I gotta stop saying that over and over. I keep saying that over and over again, and I need to stop. I need to just stop saying the same things over. Sorry, I'm beating on myself a little bit here. The other thing that keeps me playing games too is that games got me into programming, got me interested in programming. And mostly because games were always pushing the limits of the hardware they were on. Almost always they were pushing the limits. And reading books about, like, I have Michael Abrash's Big Black Book. He was the guy that did a lot of things like Doom earlier on. And just reading a lot of that behind-the-scenes stuff, the postmortems and things from developers about how they made these games and all the challenges they faced and hardware and how they had to trick the hardware into doing the things that they wanted to do. And, you know, on the NES, you could only have, I think it was 6 sprites per line. And in order to get around that, like in Legend of Zelda and whatnot, I think it was 6. The Legend of Zelda and games like that, they got around it by making the sprites flicker, which is why you can see in, like, the NES Legend of Zelda games, you can see sprites starting to flicker from time to time. And that was purposely put in so that they could overcome the limit of having 6 sprites per line or 5 sprites per line. I forget what it was. Where by flickering like that, what they were doing is they were turning one sprite on for one frame and then turning it off for the next frame and turning the other one on for the next frame. And they were, that way, they never exceeded the limit of how many sprites they could have per line while still exceeding it visually. And it's stuff like that that just fascinated the hell out of me. And games even today continue to fascinate me because as I'm playing a game, in my head, I'm seeing the code going on. I'm like, oh, how did they do that? Oh, they probably did this and they probably did that. And oh, there's a little Direct 3D, some tricks going on in there. And there's some volumetric fog that they threw in so that they wouldn't have to put a loading, so they wouldn't have to, so you wouldn't see the poor textures out in the background. So they could put lower res textures out in the background so that the frame rate would stay consistent. Or, oh, they put this scene in where Lara Croft is walking through a, there was a really cool one where she was climbing a ladder in one of the Tomb Raider games. They show Lara Croft, like one of the newer ones. They show her climbing a ladder, and the camera goes up above her and shows her coming down the ladder from above. And they did that mostly, I think, so that they could hide the loading of the next area, right? So as you as a player, you still have control and you're still moving down the ladder, but the game has purposely put less polygons on the screen so that it has more cycles in order to load the next area seamlessly, so you don't see a loading screen. It's stuff like that where they're like hiding things in here and in there that's really cool to see, and it just keeps me. I'm still very fascinated, still very interested in games because they're always doing something, some little trick here or there that's to try to make ends meet, to make things work well, and still pushing that hardware as hard as they can usually. And so that also kind of keeps me playing games because I'm that whole fascination there. But I guess that wasn't 5 reasons, but it's the top reasons that I think I continue to play even as a 35-year-old man, where I, technically it's, the society tells me that it's a kid's thing and not an adult thing, and we know as gamers that that's not the case, that there's plenty of adults things with games, and I think a lot of people are starting to catch on to that. But it's there's still that stigma attached to it still. But I think it's slowly starting to ease out, especially with say what you will about casual games. I feel like casual games have finally made regular games more accepted. Because more people are playing stuff now and they're like, oh, okay, I see I see the appeal of this now. The Wii also did a lot of that, where you could have people stand up and play tennis with the Wiimotes, and it got people active, and they're like, oh, people who wouldn't have normally been game players, well, now they're at a party, and people are having this party game where they're playing tennis, and they're like, oh, this is not so bad. And it becomes that sort of gateway to let you into more things later on, and or not. At the very least, it gives you a little bit more. It gives us hardcore gamers, I guess, more legitimacy, more acceptance, I suppose. But anywho, yeah, not 5 reasons, but those are some of my reasons that I can think of as I'm talking to you here and doing this thing. But I think I have rattled on quite long enough for one episode of this. Thanks so much for watching on YouTube or listening on SoundCloud. I will continue forward with Cube Ramblings as it goes, and I will see you guys next Sunday.